Wow, treasured greetings again. My name is Jill Treasure, and we are continuing um, in this lockdown to cover and assist basically the students in the space of information technology or who are doing any other course basically because the subject becomes key to every course. I mean, it's one of those subjects you will do as a first year student. Um, Regardless of the course you're doing. I know as a part-time lecturer that I have students in different spaces. So this is a recording to try and help you acquire more knowledge, um, prepare for your assignments, and actually be able to do them, and also your exams as you get ready for your exams. This is not the first session that we're doing. Uh, in the other session, we started with the general concepts of information technology. We have covered the types of computer, the main parts of a computer, what happens, the key things to be aware of when you start a computer, hardware and software, input devices, output devices. We then covered accessibility, which is not about access, but a way of making sure that people with limitations or disabilities also can use computers if they are hired into a company. Then we ended with storage. Thank you for joining us again. This is a continuation of what I just spoke about. That session is in Unlimited Treasure YouTube channel and it is saved as basic concepts of information technology. You can find it there and thank you for watching and interacting. Feel free to do so. Today we continue with memory. Okay, we ended up with storage, and now one of the things that students confuse is the difference between storage and memory. Storage, it stores. Memory, that's not storage, right? So we have RAM and ROM, which is very popular, which are some of the things that you need to know as your introduction to this basics, right? So the basic thing that you can understand about RAM is that it's a volatile memory. You know, there's so many people who work on a computer every day. They never get to switch it off. They open a lot of applications, and you don't know what you're doing to your RAM when you do that. So I think a classic example is really that the more you open a lot of documents in your computer, you clutter in your RAM. So because the memory is the working memory, that's not storage. So when you save things, you are assisting your RAM, which is why it's very important for you to keep saving things and to only open applications that you are using. Sometimes you'll see your computer becoming much slower. That's really because you are cluttering your RAM. I normally just give an example, like, when you are thinking of many things at the same time, um, sometimes we end up, if you're not committing to any, if you're not stopping at any point and saying, this is the decision I'm making, and therefore, this is my next steps going forward, then it's more like you are working on RAM. When you have a conclusion to the matter and say, you know what, I know in my personal life, this is what's going on. In my work life, this is what's going on. In my work life, this is what's going on. And if you keep on having a lot of issues open, that's what will cause you stress, right? So to RAM, that's what happens. You open a lot of things and maybe you have a 2 gig RAM or a 4 gig or an 8 gig, depending really on what your use of a computer is, then you end up stressing your RAM because you are dealing with many things at the same time. But when you start releasing those things and say, you know what, this is now what I'm going to do about this matter in my personal life, this is what I'm going to do about this matter in my work life. That's like closing an issue. It's like you are saving it, moving it from your RAM to the storage, which works better. So the thing to remember about RAM is that you really need to save. It's also important because should you say, for example, you forgot to charge your laptop while you're working on it, at some point the battery will run out. And that recovery thing doesn't always work. So it may happen that you're busy with your many assignments and you've opened them and you have many tabs open in whatever type of Explorer, whether it's Internet Explorer or Firefox, whatever you're using. Then you keep on opening a new tab, and you leave them open because you think they are all important, but you don't know what you're doing to your RAM. So if your laptop dies, the chances of you recovering that information are slim because they are in the working memory, they are not in the saved storage, right? I think you need to just understand the difference between storage and memory. RAM is the working memory, it's not storage. So it's important that you save your information so that you don't leave them in this volatile memory because you lose your information and you'll be super stressed, right? So that's RAM. And then ROM, then it's non-volatile, is that chip that will make sure that your information is well stored and it's read-only memory, basically, right? So on daily basis, I'm stressing RAM because you really deal with it on a daily basis. It's one of the contributing factors to computer performance. So make sure that you're not cluttering your RAM and then it affects your computer performance. Sometimes you feel your laptop making a lot of noise. You must be thinking maybe you're doing something to your RAM. Of course, there's a couple of factors that contribute to your computer performance, RAM being a key part of that, and we'll talk to other factors later on. So to be safe, just make sure you save your documents. You open only the applications that you are using. If you're not using it at that time, just close it. You are helping your computer, right? So this is remember, this is what I spoke about when we're talking storage. Again, with RAM, we've got different gigs of RAM. Really, it depends on what you're using your computer for. Someone could have a 2 gig of RAM and it could be fine. Someone, maybe because they use a lot of heavier application, that may not be fun for them. Someone could be gaming and that would be way too small for them. The computer will just keep hanging. So it really depends. Let's take an example of an administrator, and then we take an example of someone who develops software, and then we take an example of maybe a gamer, right? So let's say this, just to expand of it on a developer, let's say it's a developer but also plays around with a lot of editing, maybe a bit of Photoshop, so that whatever they program, maybe they're a programmer and also a website developer. Let's say all these people work for the same company and therefore they all have 4 gigs of RAM. So 4 gig of RAM for the administrator may be fine. Let's assume that this administrator only deals with Office, right? So they're typing documents, they only using Microsoft Word, Excel, and PowerPoint. Anything else more than that, very rare. So this 4 gig would be fun for this person because they're really not processing a lot of information. When we go to that developer now, this 4 gig may be enough, but if it happens that sometimes they open those applications at the same time, then it's going to be slow. So actually, for the example that I gave of developing Photoshop, developing websites, and also developing maybe in your Java or Visual Basic, whatever it is, or developing some bots, UiPath or automation anywhere, whatever it is, then that 4 gig may need to be extended to an 18 gig, to an 8 gig or a 16 gig. It may not be enough, right? But that's based on the use that this person has for this computer. Then you have a gamer. Again, is this person gaming more online or are they bringing things to their local machine? It makes a difference. If they are more online, of course, there may be other things that we need to check, but right now I'm just more talking about the RAM. So you may find that it's enough, but if it's someone who's maybe playing games on their local machine, it may be slow. So again, it's just a matter of what do you do, what applications are you using, how heavy they are, then your RAM may not be. So it becomes important for you to know what is a 2 gigs of RAM, what is a 4 gig, what is an 8 gig, right? If it's at work, you simply call IT, like my students would do. But in your personal life, you need to understand what makes your computer work better and then have the right RAM in your computer, right? So then we go into computer performance. I spoke about RAM, the RAM size. When I talked about those 2 gigs, 4 gigs, 8 gigs, those are the RAM size. So it's a combination of things. All I'm saying is with the RAM, always make sure that you only open the applications that you're using and everything else close it. And also, even if you are searching things on the internet, stick to one or few tabs. Don't have a lot of tabs opening to a point where you start saying open in new, keep on saying open a new tab, then you have the full thing because your business assignment, you find them all important. Please close them, and as often as possible just restart your computer, right? Then you are managing the RAM. You also have your CPU speed. These are some of the things I'll show you later in your computer because you need to know where they are. Some of you will be using your 64-bit. Some of you will see this Intel Celeron and all those things as there. We'll show you where it is. It's very important, but if it's a work computer, most people will just be allocated what it is. When you go by, you need to know. Hard disk, the speed and the capacity. Hard disk is that internal disk in your computer. Most people will have a 70 gig or 100 gig. It's that space. But just like another type of computer that you are used to, your phone, you know that as it gets full, your phone becomes slower. So it's exactly that. As your computer gets full, then it becomes slow. We spoke about backup yesterday. It's important that you back up as much as you can. You relieve, you make sure that you are not more than 70% full in your hard disk. Then it's still better. But the closer it is to 80, really you're gonna start seeing it becoming slow, right? The other thing being the number of applications running in line with RAM. I've spoken to this. The type of graphic card, depending on how important this is to you, because if your machine is going to be processing many graphics and it happens to have a weak graphic card, then it will be slower, right? So if graphic cards are important to your computer and if you've got a weaker graphic card, it will it will slow down your computer. Defragmenting files, if you have a lot of files that are really broken, your computer tries to read them so that it becomes slower. So it's very important that you are aware of these things even as you build your supercomputer. Maybe you want a very fast computer. Be aware of these things and make sure that you're not the one who is saving your computer from being fast. Okay, then we're gonna get into software. Jeez, let's get into software in more detail. I introduced what a software is in the previous session. So in the session, we'll go deeper into what a software is. A computer program. It's a set of instructions really sent to your computer. I know most of you talk about software this, I'm using the software. It's basically a set of instructions sent to your computer to perform a certain task. So back in the days, we used to have them coming through discs and DVDs and all that, but these days, a lot of them are online, and you get access as simple as that, right? You think of how you used to get your Microsoft Office, just to be some CD. Now we have what you call Office 365, and it doesn't need to come through a CD. So those are the softwares. There's two types of softwares, really, the operating system and the application system. So simplistic explanation of this is that you need an operating system before you can have an application software. And this becomes very important. I just normally give that example of when you go buy a laptop, this becomes very important. I know that many people will be buying laptops. You buy laptops for your siblings, for yourselves, for your children. It's very important that you understand this. because people go buy shells in shops and call them laptops. You pack it at home. It's very possible to go buy a laptop and pack it at home. And I think I'll do a session, just a different session on things to consider when buying a laptop. But this part becomes very important, right? So what is operating system software is what you need to operate the computer. There's no computer without an OS, guys. If you're gonna buy a computer and it's not, and let me just warn you, there are those shops that still sell a computer without an OS. And most are trying to make sure that there is an OS, but it's very possible that you find a shop that sells a laptop and it doesn't have OS. This can be very expensive, up to 10,000 rand you can pay just to make sure that you, and it needs a proper understanding person to set it up for you. So my advice is, in these days where many shops are really trying to make sure there's an OS in the computer by the time you buy it, is the number one question to ask, to say, is it already loaded with OS? And please ask them, please. And you are better off buying a laptop that already has OS loaded than buying the one that doesn't. Even if you're buying a second-hand laptop or computer, it's just very important, because if you mess up the installation of an OS, the rest of your applications will suffer, right? So that is what an operating system is, and some of you may be using Windows, some Apple Mac OS. You know, if you imagine in your phone that big update that you sometimes do, and you really need to be having Wi-Fi when you do that, yeah, that's your OS. Some of you use iOS because you use Apple. Then some of you, your OS would be Android. So that's what we're talking about. In the phone space, at least they make sure that you have it installed already. So what I'm basically saying is, even when you buy a computer, especially if you're not very knowledgeable in these things, make sure that you just ask them, all right, and make sure it's already installed. And then the other type is application software. Once the OS is installed, then you can install your application software. This is anything that you may want, but it is task specific. We don't all have the same application software. It depends on what you need to use it for. Someone may be wanting to use ASAP, someone may be wanting to use Word. Again, when you're buying a laptop, just try to ask them that they have the office package for you, because again, you can end up paying up to 5,000 Rand, sometimes even more, just to get the Microsoft Office loaded. But that package, that Microsoft Office package, I'm talking about more on the Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and those that come with that, right? So it's important when you get to the shops to make sure they have that. If it's not installed yet, ask them how much it is, ask them to assist you, then you're much better off. If you know someone, then at least you know someone. But if you don't know anyone, ask these questions. So application software is basically that when you have your phone, it already has an OS, then when you leave that shop, or the first type of application software they try to show you how your phone works with is whatever you'll use. And for most of you will be WhatsApp, and then the rest, whatever, then that's why you call it an app store, right? It's an application software store. Cool, that is that. I think we are done with software. These are just the examples of these, right? That being said, I think for this lesson, this should be enough, and we'll do another session. We still have a lot to cover. We will still cover, I think the next session we'll have those, we'll possibly talk to security. That's one of the very key things. I think part of what we'll talk about in the next session will also be security, because I want to talk to you guys about the importance. Earlier on, when we were talking about the importance of closing files, restarting your computer, I know most of you sometimes at your workplace, because you use work laptops, they'll push some things to your computer and you need to click on that thing and it needs to load and you need to restart your computer, and most of you keep on postponing and you don't know how bad that is. So I think that's one of the things we'll touch on: security. And there's still many other things that we need to touch on, like learn when and wireless LAN, and many more. So for this session, we'll end here and let's talk about more in the next session. All right. Thank you so much. Keep learning. We meet in the next session. You are treasured.